Last night against the Bulls, the Knicks were down by 2 when Jalen Brunson hit this shot to send it to overtime, where they'd go on to win the game. In another overtime thriller against the Hawks 9 days ago, he won the game for them with this shot to put them up by 1. Just 9 days before that, he went up against the elite defense of the Rockets, scored 17 points in the fourth quarter, and hit a huge 3 to make it a 2-possession game with a minute left. But that was a week after the Nuggets actually figured him out, holding him to a scoreless fourth quarter, only for him to dice them up as a passer, recording 7 assists in yet another clutch time win. By now, I think you get the idea. When the game is on the line, there are very few players, if any, you'd rather have the ball in the hands of than Jalen Brunson. There really isn't anything he can't do as a shot creator. When playing from the perimeter, he's primarily looking to get downhill as a driver, and although he doesn't have a ton of size or length, and isn't the most explosive athlete, he's able to consistently blow by most defenders. That's because he's elite at changing speeds. It may not be the fastest first step, but it's one of the most jarring due to how suddenly he's able to start and stop. Then when help comes, he counters with a soft touch floater. He pairs that ability to burst into a drive with some of the nastiest hesitations in the game. Notice how he pauses to see if Alex Sarr's gonna drop back. Then when he doesn't, he immediately starts a drive and gets to another floater. And the reason Sarr didn't drop back on the hesitation is because Brunson pairs that driving game with elite off-the-dribble three-point shooting. In the past 2 seasons, he's attempted over 500 pull-up threes, and he's hit a very impressive 38% of them. What makes this so deadly, though, is the way he'll blend it in with his downhill attacks. On this one, he starts a drive, and as soon as his defender's momentum starts going towards the basket, he stops on a dime and pulls back into a long-range jumper. Then here's another from that Wizards game when they found themselves down 2 in the closing seconds. Again, he's gonna start a drive, pull back to the 3-point line, but instead of pulling up for a jumper, he hesitates, creating a new angle for him to attack and get to a floater that sends it to overtime. That floater is his go-to weapon as a scorer, and it allows him to get high percentage looks on demand. Like I said, he's not a super explosive athlete, which means that on some of these drives, he isn't actually creating too much separation. But who needs separation when you can just float it over the top? It's the same thing when his driving lane gets cut off entirely. That ability to stop on a dime gives him unlimited access to the floater, and his timing on floaters is maybe the best I've ever seen. He's got this herky-jerky style of movement that allows him to throw his defenders off balance, then when they least expect it, he'll jump off of 2 feet for the shot. This season, he's attempted the 3rd most floaters of any player with 234, and he's made over 54% of them. That's really difficult to guard, and it's only amplified by the fact that when attacking downhill, he's also a constant threat to create contact and get to the line. He's not only a master of initiating contact, he's a master of selling it after the fact, and he's got all of the crafty tactics for drawing the whistle, such as with creative gathers up through defenders' arms. As a result, he's one of the highest volume foul drawers in the league. On the season, he's attempting 7.5 free throws every 75 possessions, which is 4th among all players with at least 1,000 minutes. It's even crazier if you just look at late game situations, as that's when he'll turn up the aggression as an attacker to another level. The NBA defines clutch time as the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter or overtime when the score is within 5 points. And in those situations, Brunson is averaging 13.5 free throws per 75. For all of the starting and stopping, shifty blow-bys, floaters, and foul drawing though, I'd say Brunson's most underrated attribute is his strength. He's one of the strongest guards in the NBA, which not only allows him to drive through contact or even bully smaller defenders, it allows him to get into the chest of his defender on drives and create separation, such as for mid-range jumpers. Just when a defender thinks they have Brunson figured out and they're able to prevent him from getting to a floater or drawing a foul, he's stopping on a dime for an automatic bucket. On the season, he's attempting 9.5 mid-range shots every 75 possessions, and he's making a scorching 49.8% of them. And he can get into these shots in a seemingly endless amount of ways. Not only can he stop and pop or use bumps to get space, he can spin into them in either direction, which is all thanks to the fact that he has maybe the best footwork in the NBA, absolutely destroying defenders from the pivot with some ferocious sets of moves. Don't get me wrong, a lot of these shots are very tough, and it's true that there are on-ball creators out there who do a better job of getting the easiest looks for themselves. But Brunson separates himself in two different ways. The first is of course through his sheer ability to make difficult shots. What's tough for most guys isn't always tough for Brunson, which is why a lot of these off-balance mid-range jumpers and floaters are still landing at a 50% clip. The second way he separates himself is through his ball security. He's got a stupidly tight handle and rarely ever attempts risky passes, which means he quite literally never turns the ball over. So even if he gets to one of those tough shots and doesn't hit, there's still an opportunity to get on the offensive glass. This particular skill becomes more and more valuable the later into games you get, as every possession matters more and more. The fact that the Knicks know they're gonna get a shot up basically every time down the floor makes things so much easier. If we look at the relationship between how long a player has the ball in their hands and how often they turn it over, you'll notice that most of the high volume creators are also picking up a decent amount of turnovers. Brunson is a complete outlier though, as he leads the entire NBA in time of possession while only ranking 37th in turnovers. When you account for everything from the 3-level shot creation to the foul drawing, difficult shot making, and ball security, Brunson's an incredibly efficient one-on-one scorer. On the season, he's generating 1.06 points per isolation, good for the 86th percentile among all players. And if you thought that was tough to defend, remember that if the defense tries to collapse or put 2 on the ball at any moment, he's a more than capable passer who will consistently find the open man. What's so crazy though is that isolations aren't even his go-to action as a perimeter scorer. That'd be the pick and roll, where he's been as good as anyone. On those plays, he's generating 1.08 points per possession, good for the 93rd percentile, and he's one of those few guys who has a counter for every single coverage. If the big is sitting back in a drop, he's a threat to get to that automatic pull-up 3, and even if he doesn't have space to get to the pull-up, he can attack the drop big on a drive and get to his spots in the mid-range. Remember, he's got elite ball security, so if the defense decides to put 2 on the ball either in a hedge or a trap, he'll keep his dribble live to hunt for an angle and find the open man. That leaves defenses with the option of switching, which takes us right back to square one with him walking down a mismatch in isolation. It's actually in the high pick and roll where he did almost all of his damage in that Denver game I talked about earlier. They wanted to attack Jokic in the primary action, and that's where Brunson picked apart the defense as a passer. The Nuggets tried having Jokic hedge to get the ball out of his hands, to which he patiently made the right read, finding Cat in the short roll for a drive. The Nuggets also tried dropping Jokic back to avoid those advantageous passes, and because of Cat's threat as a shooter, Westbrook had to come over from the wing, leaving nobody on Josh Hart as he slips behind the defense for a layup. Then Denver adjusted by moving Jokic onto OG Anunoby, so the Knicks just used OG as the screener instead. Jokic is back in that drop, which means Gordon has to cheat over to tag OG on a roll, leaving Cat with Jamal Murray on him as he puts it on the deck for some more easy points. Sometimes though, the Knicks like to instead get into these actions with an empty corner. That way there's nobody in position to tag Cat on a roll. The Nets actually tried switching this action, but that just left Cat with a mismatch to attack in the post as he quickly scored over the top. So a minute and a half later when they set it up again, the Nets decided against switching, instead having Claxton drop back. Like clockwork, Brunson attacked the space, created separation, and got to a mid-range jumper. I should also mention that he's maybe the best in the league at rejecting the screen, so when setting up with an empty corner, there's nobody in position to prevent him from attacking baseline. With all of that said though, when it comes to those clutch time possessions in the final minutes, I'd say more times than not, they're looking to clear out for a top of the key isolation. This is exactly what led to that game winner against the Hawks. They spaced the floor in a way that had nobody on the wings, taking away any nail help, which gave Brunson all the room he needed to get to the mid-range. When playing from up top like this, they'll often start possessions with a ball screen from one of their wings to get Brunson a more favorable matchup. Then if he gets the switch he wants, they'll clear out to give him the middle of the floor, and he'll get to work in isolation, putting defenses in a really tough spot. He's so deadly one-on-one that you don't want to give him the switch, but if his defender goes under the screen to keep the matchup, he'll use that space to pull up for a three. And they can't stay on the ball by fighting over the top of screens because he'll almost always turn the corner with speed to force the switch, meaning that he can basically handpick his matchups late in games. For reference, here's what that looks like when the defense doesn't switch. He turns the corner, nobody's there, and with his man on his hip, he easily gets to the paint for a floater. Of course, the defense could always avoid both the switch and the drive by having that second defender hedge, but then he's right back to patiently making the right read as a playmaker and creating open shots. Again, he's able to counter every coverage. This time you're going to see the Nets switch, then have the original defender run back to the ball with a late double, and he hits McHale in the middle for an easy jumper. So most defenses are forced into a spot where they have to let Brunson get the switch, then they're just going to play him straight up. This time he attacks from an open side and gets to that signature floater. Speaking of which, open side isolations are another late game staple for New York's offense. You'll often see him play from the triple threat in these spots, where he'll use jab steps to threaten a drive, and if given space will rise up for a jumper. If his defender doesn't bite on the jabs and presses up on the jumper, that's when he'll attack. Notice how the Raptors have completely packed the paint, but because of that mid-range game, he's still able to get to a good shot. Oh yeah, I should also mention that in addition to the multifaceted perimeter attack, he's one of few guards who are a legitimate mismatch in the post. I don't just mean against small guards either. He'll even take bigger wings to the post, where he's usually looking to turn over his right shoulder on a drive. And it sort of goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. If at any point during his post-up he draws a double, he'll keep his head up and find the open man for easy offense. As things currently stand, the Knicks have the 6th best clutch offense in the NBA, scoring 121.5 points every 100 possessions. But it's important to note that this clutch offense is basically all Brunson, which is reflected in the numbers. I had to double and triple check his averages in the clutch to make sure I had them right. He's only played 89 minutes, so take the sample with a grain of salt, but in those 89 minutes, he's averaging 42 points and 8 assists per 75 on a very efficient 61.7% true shooting. His ability to create good shots on demand for both himself and others out of any situation without turning the ball over is one of the most valuable things a player can do on the court. He's got the moments, he's got the numbers, and he's building a very strong case for Clutch Player of the Year. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Brunson. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.